I will never forget that phone call. The cold, stern tone in my father's voice telling me to come home immediately. No explanation, just a demand. When I arrived, my stomach dropped at the sight of Mia, my best friend Kyle's sister, sitting in our living room, cradling a newborn baby. Before I could ask what was happening, she pointed at me and announced I was the father of her child. My parents believed her without question. My mother cried. My father called me disgraceful. When I denied everything and demanded a DNA test, they gave me an ultimatum: take responsibility or leave the family forever. Before I tell you how my life fell apart and how I built it back up stronger than ever, let me know where you're watching from. Drop a like if you've ever been wrongfully accused of something, and subscribe to hear stories of justice finally being served. To understand why this accusation hit me so hard, you need to know a bit about my background. My name is Ruben, and when this nightmare began, I was 26 years old in my final year of engineering school. I was balancing full-time classes with a part-time job at an electronics store to help pay for books and living expenses. I was not rich by any means, but I was stable and had a clear path forward. My parents raised me in what I would call a traditional household, with strong emphasis on family reputation, moral character, and responsibility. My father worked as a hospital administrator for 30 years in our small town, and everyone knew and respected him. My mother taught third grade at the local elementary school, where all the parents adored her. They had high expectations for me, their only son. Get good grades, stay out of trouble, make the family proud. Simple rules that I had followed my entire life. This background made the accusation even more devastating. In our family, reputation was everything, and suddenly mine was destroyed. Kyle and I had been friends since sophomore year of high school. We bonded over our shared interest in computer programming and spent countless weekends building custom PCs and playing video games in his basement. Through our friendship, I became a regular visitor at his house and got to know his family well. His parents treated me like another son, always inviting me to stay for dinner or family game nights. Mia was Kyle's younger sister, 4 years younger than us. During my visits to their home, our interactions were minimal. She would sometimes join us for dinner or briefly interrupt our gaming sessions to ask Kyle for something, but we rarely had one-on-one conversations. She was just my friend's little sister, nothing more. From what Kyle told me, Mia had always been the problematic child in their family. She struggled in school, frequently lied to her parents, and seemed to thrive on creating drama. By the time she turned 18, she had dropped out of community college and cycled through a series of what Kyle called sketchy boyfriends. Just keep your distance from my sister. Kyle had warned me more than once. She has a habit of pulling people into her messes. I took his advice and maintained a polite but distant relationship with Mia whenever our paths crossed. There was never any hint of romance or attraction between us, which made her accusation all the more bewildering. The party that Mia later claimed was the night of conception happened 9 months before her baby was born. Kyle's parents were out of town for a weekend, and he decided to host a small gathering. About 15 people showed up, mostly mutual friends from college. I remember seeing Mia there with a guy she introduced as her new boyfriend, though I cannot recall his name now. I only stayed at the party for about 3 hours because I had an early shift at the electronics store the next morning. My interaction with Mia that night was limited to a brief conversation in the kitchen while I was getting a drink. We talked about her recent job at a local coffee shop and my upcoming graduation. That was it. I left around 11, drove straight home, and texted Kyle when I arrived safely as he had asked. After that night, I saw Mia occasionally when visiting Kyle, but nothing seemed unusual about our interactions. Kyle would sometimes complain about his sister's latest drama, mentioning she had quit her coffee shop job, broken up with her boyfriend, and was hanging out with a new crowd. I sympathized, but did not pay much attention to these updates. Mia's life was her own business, and I had no reason to be involved. Then came the day that changed everything. 9 months after that party, I received that fateful call from my father demanding I come home immediately. I arrived at my parents' house confused and worried, my mind racing through possible scenarios. Had someone gotten hurt? Was there a family emergency? Nothing prepared me for what awaited me in the living room. My parents sat stiffly on the sofa, their faces etched with disappointment and anger. Across from them in the armchair, usually reserved for guests of honor, sat Mia cradling a tiny baby wrapped in a pale blue blanket. The moment I entered, all eyes turned to me, and the atmosphere grew even more tense. "Tell him," my father commanded, his voice barely containing his rage. Mia looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "This is your son Ruben," she said, adjusting the blanket to reveal the sleeping infant's face. "I did not want to do this, but you have been avoiding my calls, and I need help. You cannot just pretend he does not exist." I stood frozen, my mind struggling to process what was happening. "What? That is not my child. We never even—" I could not finish the sentence as shock overtook me. "Do not lie to us," my mother cried out, her voice breaking. "How could you do this? We raised you better than to abandon your responsibilities." "I am not lying," I insisted, my voice rising with panic. "I never slept with Mia. Never. This is completely impossible." Mia's tears flowed more freely now. "It was after Kyle's party 9 months ago. Everyone had left or passed out. You helped me clean up in the kitchen, and one thing led to another." She trailed off, looking down at the baby. The accusation was so absurd, so completely fabricated, that I almost laughed, despite the gravity of the situation. That never happened. I left that party early. I texted Kyle when I got home. You can check the timestamps. My father stood up, towering over me with fury in his eyes. Timestamps can be manipulated. What cannot be denied is that child in her arms. Are you really going to stand there and deny your own flesh and blood? Yes, because it is not mine. I shouted, my composure finally breaking. I demand a DNA test. That will prove I am telling the truth. The slap came so suddenly, I barely registered it until the sting spread across my cheek. My mother stood before me, her hand still raised, tears streaming down her face. "We did not raise you to run from your responsibilities," she hissed. "We did not raise you to abandon a woman and child who need you." "I am not running from anything," I replied, my voice quieter now, my hand on my burning cheek. "I am standing my ground for the truth. I will take a DNA test today if possible." My father shook his head in disgust. "Your mother and I have discussed this. You have two choices. Either you step up, acknowledge your son, and make arrangements to marry Mia, or you are no longer part of this family." "You cannot be serious," I whispered, looking between them. "You would disown me over a lie without even considering that I might be telling the truth. The evidence is in her arms," my father replied coldly. "Make your choice." In that moment, standing in the living room, where I had grown up surrounded by family photos and memories, I had to make the most difficult decision of my life. Accept responsibility for a child that was not mine and live a lie, or stand by the truth and lose my family. "I will not admit to something I did not do," I said finally, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "I cannot believe you would take her word over mine without any proof." My father pointed to the door. "Then get out. Do not come back until you are ready to be the man we thought we raised." I looked at my mother, hoping for some sign of doubt, some willingness to consider my side of the story. Her eyes remained hard, her expression unyielding. "I will prove this is a lie," I said, as I walked toward the door. "And when I do, I hope you remember this moment." That was the beginning of my exile. Within days, my parents had contacted everyone in our extended family, telling them I had fathered a child out of wedlock and refused to take responsibility. Aunts, uncles, and cousins, who had once celebrated my achievements and milestones, now looked at me with disappointment or avoided me altogether. The consequences extended beyond family relationships. My father, with his connections in our community, made sure everyone knew of my supposed moral failing. The scholarship committee at my university, which included parents from prominent families who knew my father, suddenly found administrative reasons to revoke my financial aid for the final semester. The owner of the electronics store where I worked, a longtime family friend of my parents, called me into his office one afternoon. "I cannot have someone with your reputation working with customers," he explained awkwardly. "Some parents have expressed concerns about their teenagers interacting with you. Even Kyle, my best friend, for years turned his back on me. Mia might be dramatic sometimes," he told me over the phone, "but she would not lie about something this serious. I cannot believe you are trying to deny it instead of stepping up." Within 2 weeks of being thrown out of my family home, I had lost my financial support, my job, my best friend, and my reputation. At 26 years old, with one semester left of college, I found myself completely alone, branded as a liar and a deadbeat father for a child that was not mine. I moved into the cheapest apartment I could find, a tiny studio with peeling paint and questionable plumbing in the oldest part of town. My savings meant for post-graduation job hunting now had to stretch to cover rent, food, and remaining tuition. I picked up whatever odd jobs I could find, working as a delivery driver in the evenings and doing data entry on weekends. My sleep dwindled to 4 hours a night as I struggled to balance work classes and the emotional toll of my situation. The isolation was perhaps the hardest part. People I had known for years crossed the street to avoid talking to me. Former classmates whispered behind my back. My phone, once filled with messages from friends and family, now remained silent for days at a time. I found myself checking it constantly, hoping for some message of support, or better yet, news that Mia had confessed to her lie. Depression crept in like a slow fog, gradually obscuring my view of the future I had planned. Some mornings I could barely find the motivation to get out of bed. What was the point of finishing my degree? If no one would hire me, how could I build a career with this black mark on my reputation? The accusations had tainted everything. My turning point came from an unexpected source. Professor Mason, my advanced engineering design instructor, noticed my declining performance and asked me to stay after class one day. Instead of the reprimand, I expected he asked what was wrong. "You have always been one of my most promising students," he said. "Something is clearly affecting your work, and I would like to help if I can." Perhaps it was the genuine concern in his voice, or maybe I had simply reached my breaking point, but I found myself telling him everything. The false accusation, my parents' ultimatum, the community's reaction, all of it poured out in a torrent of words I could not stop. When I finally fell silent, I expected disbelief or judgment. Instead, he offered me a cup of coffee from his personal machine and asked a simple question: "Have you pursued a legal paternity test?" The question jolted me. In the chaos of losing everything, I had been reactive rather than proactive. I had denied the accusations, but had not taken concrete steps to prove my innocence. I do not know how I admit it, and I am not sure I can afford a lawyer right now. Professor Mason nodded thoughtfully. "My sister is a family law attorney in the next county. Let me give her a call. In the meantime, I need a research assistant for my department project. The position comes with a small stipend and potential credit toward your final semester." That conversation marked the beginning of my counterattack. With a new part-time job in the engineering department and guidance from Professor Mason's sister, I began the process of legally establishing non-paternity. I opened a separate bank account and deposited every extra dollar I could spare toward legal fees. Gloria Williams, Professor Mason's sister, agreed to take my case at a reduced rate. "False paternity claims are more common than people realize," she explained during our first meeting. "The courts have procedures for this, but we need to be strategic." The legal process was frustratingly slow. Mia and her family, now backed by my parents, seemed to have unlimited resources to delay and complicate the proceedings. They missed appointments, claimed the baby was too sick for testing, and filed motion after motion, questioning the necessity of the test. They are stalling, Gloria explained after another postponed hearing. They probably hope you will run out of money or patience and just give in. But their tactics only strengthened my resolve. Each obstacle they threw in my path convinced me further that Mia was lying. Why fight so hard against a simple test if she truly believed I was the father? Throughout this period, I continued my studies with renewed determination. My grades, which had slipped during the initial shock, began to improve again. I threw myself into my coursework and research position, finding solace in the concrete problems of engineering that had clear, definitive solutions, unlike the messy, emotional chaos of my personal life. The semester was nearing its end when Gloria called with news. The judge had finally ordered a mandatory paternity test with sanctions if Mia failed to comply. The results should be available within 2 weeks after the test, Gloria explained. Then we will know for sure. The day of the test, I saw Mia for the first time since that confrontation in my parents' living room. She avoided eye contact as the technician collected our samples, the baby fussing in her arms. I noticed dark circles under her eyes and a nervous tremor in her hands. She looked afraid, and in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that she had been lying all along. The results arrived exactly 15 days after the test, delivered in a sealed envelope to Gloria's office. I sat across from her desk, my heart pounding as she opened it and scanned the contents. Her face revealed nothing as she read, maintaining the professional composure that had guided me through this nightmare. "The test results are definitive," she said, finally looking up at me. "You are excluded as the biological father of the child. The probability of paternity is 0%. Those words should have brought immediate relief, but instead I felt strangely numb. After months of fighting to prove what I had known all along, the victory seemed hollow. My reputation had been destroyed, my relationships shattered, my finances drained, all because of a lie that could have been disproven with a simple test from the beginning. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Now we file these results with the court and formally close the paternity case, Gloria explained. You have no legal obligations to the child. Additionally, we can consider a defamation lawsuit against Mia for the damages her false accusation has caused. I shook my head. I do not want to drag this out any longer. I just want the truth to be known. Gloria nodded, understanding in her eyes. I will make sure the results are properly filed and that all relevant parties are notified, including your parents. The aftermath unfolded quickly. Kyle called the day after the results were filed, his voice choked with emotion. Ruben, man, I do not know what to say. Mia confessed everything after the results came back. She does not even know who the real father is. She picked you because she knew you had a good family, good prospects, and she thought you would do the right thing without questioning it. He paused, clearly struggling. She did this once before, accused a guy from her high school, but retracted it when he immediately demanded a test. I should have remembered that. I should have believed you. I listened in silence, torn between vindication and lingering hurt. Why did she do it? Kyle sighed heavily. She was scared. Unmarried, unemployed, pregnant, with no support from the actual father. She thought you would be her way out. I am so sorry, Ruben. I failed you as a friend. Mia herself sent a written apology delivered to Gloria's office rather than directly to me. In it, she admitted the entire fabrication, acknowledged the harm she had caused, and promised to publicly clear my name. Whether this was motivated by genuine remorse or fear of legal repercussions, I could not say, but the damage was already done. Word spread through our small community rapidly. The same people who had shunned me now approached with awkward apologies and offers of support. My former boss at the electronics store called, offering my job back with a raise. The scholarship committee sent a formal letter stating they were reconsidering their previous decision in light of new information. These gestures, while appreciated, came too late. I had already found new ways to support myself. Professor Mason had connected me with a research grant that would cover my final semester, and my part-time position in his department had evolved into a potential job recommendation upon graduation. The most significant response came from my parents. 3 days after the results were filed, they began calling repeatedly. When I did not answer, they left voicemails, each more desperate than the last. "Ruben, please call us back," my mother pleaded in one message, her voice breaking. "We made a terrible mistake. We need to talk to you." My father, whose stern voice had ordered me out of the house months ago now, sounded defeated. "Son, I was wrong. We were wrong. Please give us a chance to make this right." When calls went unanswered, they began showing up at my apartment, leaving notes and small gifts, gift cards for groceries, a new winter coat, books for my final classes. Each offering came with notes begging for forgiveness, asking for a chance to explain. They even went to Professor Mason, who called me into his office one afternoon. "Your parents came by today," he said carefully. They seemed genuinely remorseful. "They should be," I replied, the bitterness I had tried to suppress finally surfacing. They chose to believe a virtual stranger over their own son. They threw me out without a second thought. Professor Mason nodded thoughtfully. "That is true, and you have every right to your anger. But at some point, you will need to decide whether holding on to that anger serves you better than exploring the possibility of reconciliation, however limited that might be." His words stayed with me as I approached graduation. With my name cleared and my degree nearly complete, I had options I had not dared hope for just months earlier. Several engineering firms had expressed interest after seeing my research work with Professor Mason. I had a new circle of friends who knew the truth from the beginning. I was rebuilding my life piece by piece. The question of my parents loomed large in this reconstruction. Could I forgive them? Should I? Was family obligation strong enough to overcome their fundamental betrayal of trust? After weeks of consideration, I agreed to meet them at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. When I arrived, they were already seated, my mother nervously shredding a napkin, my father staring into his untouched coffee. They looked older, somehow worn down by the consequences of their choice. "Thank you for coming," my father said, as I sat down across from them. Gone was the authoritative tone I had grown up with, replaced by something more hesitant, almost fragile. "We are so sorry, Ruben." My mother burst out, reaching for my hand. I let her take it, though I felt nothing at her touch. "We should have believed you. We should have listened. We failed you completely." "Yes," I agreed, simply. "You did. We want to make it up to you," my father continued. "Whatever you need. Money for school. A place to stay, anything. We want you to come home." I looked between them. These people who had raised me, taught me about integrity and family loyalty, then abandoned those principles when it mattered most. "Home," I repeated the word, feeling strange on my tongue. "I do not think that exists anymore, at least not in the way you mean." "Please, Ruben," my mother pleaded. "We made a terrible mistake. Families make mistakes. We can fix this." I shook my head slowly. "Some things cannot be fixed. They can only be rebuilt, and that takes time." I withdrew my hand from hers. Trust is like a glass vase. Once broken, it can be glued back together, but it will never be as strong as it was before. You chose to believe the worst about me without any evidence. You threw me away without a second chance. "We were wrong," my father admitted, his voice breaking. "Completely wrong. I have no excuse." "I do not hate you," I said after a moment of silence, "but I do not trust you anymore. I cannot just come home and pretend none of this happened." We talked for nearly 2 hours, covering ground that was painful for all of us. I told them about the months of struggle, the depression, the financial hardship. They told me about their own journey, how they had begun to doubt Mia's story, even before the test results, but had been too proud to admit they might have been wrong. In the end, we reached an uneasy truce. I would not cut them out of my life completely, but neither would I return to the close relationship we once had. We would start small with occasional meals and phone calls and see where time led us. The months following that coffee shop meeting brought significant changes to my life. I graduated with honors, my final project earning recognition from the engineering department. Professor Mason's recommendation helped me secure a position at a prestigious firm in a city 3 hours away, far enough to necessitate a complete relocation, yet close enough for occasional visits home if I chose to make them. The new city offered me what I needed most: anonymity. No one there knew about the false accusation or the family drama. I could introduce myself without the shadow of scandal hanging over me. I found an apartment in a modern building with actual functioning appliances, a luxury after months in my rundown studio. I bought new furniture, new clothes, small symbols of the fresh start I was creating. At work, I quickly established myself as dedicated and innovative. My colleagues, impressed by my technical skills, invited me to social gatherings where I began building a new circle of friends. People who knew me only for who I was now, not for the false narrative that had nearly destroyed me. 6 months into my new job, I met Jessica, another engineer who had recently joined the firm. Smart, funny, and refreshingly direct, she asked me out for coffee after we successfully completed a difficult project together. That coffee led to dinner, which led to more dates. As our relationship deepened, I knew I needed to tell her about my past. "I want you to know everything about me," I said one evening as we walked along the riverfront near my apartment, "including the parts that are not easy to talk about." I told her the whole story, from the false accusation to my parents' betrayal to the eventual vindication. I held nothing back, including my ongoing struggle to rebuild a relationship with my family. When I finished, I waited for her reaction with nervous anticipation. Jessica squeezed my hand. "Thank you for trusting me with that," she said simply. "It explains a lot about you, your caution with people, your independence. I admire how you handled it, how you fought for the truth." Her acceptance marked another turning point in my healing process. If someone who had no obligation to believe me could accept my story without question, perhaps there was hope for deeper connections despite what I had endured. My relationship with my parents continued to evolve, marked by careful steps forward and occasional retreats. I visited for holidays, but always stayed in a hotel rather than their home. I accepted some financial help with student loan payments, but maintained my financial independence in all other areas. We spoke weekly conversations that grew less awkward with time, but never fully regained the ease we once had. Mia's life took its own complicated turns. According to Kyle, with whom I had cautiously renewed contact, she eventually identified the actual father of her child and pursued child support through proper legal channels. She moved to another state, perhaps seeking the same fresh start I had found in my new city. Kyle assured me she had genuinely regretted her actions, though I chose not to pursue any direct contact with her. The experience changed me in fundamental ways. I became more cautious about who I trusted, more careful about protecting myself from potential harm. Yet paradoxically, I also became more confident in standing up for what I knew to be true, even when facing opposition from authority figures or loved ones. I learned that sometimes the most important person to believe in you is yourself. When everyone else accepted the lie, I held firm to the truth. That inner certainty sustained me through months of isolation and struggle, ultimately leading to vindication. Most importantly, I discovered that family is not merely about blood relations or legal ties. True family consists of those who stand by you when truth becomes inconvenient, who give you the benefit of the doubt when accusations fly, who help you rebuild when your world collapses. By that definition, Professor Mason showed more family loyalty than my own parents. The colleagues who welcomed me at my new job demonstrated more familial acceptance than relatives who had known me all my life. Trust, I now understand, must be earned rather than assumed, even from family, especially from family. Love without trust is merely sentiment, easily discarded when challenged. Real love includes faith in the other person's character, a willingness to question convenient narratives, and the courage to stand by someone when doing so is difficult. Have you ever stood alone for the truth when everyone else believed a lie? What gave you the strength to keep going? Share your story in the comments. Hit that like button if this resonated with you, and subscribe for more real stories about overcoming injustice. Remember, sometimes the hardest battles are fought within our own families, but standing up for the truth is always worth it in the end. Thank you for listening, and I hope my story gives strength to anyone facing their own uphill battle for justice.